Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight at this town hall, which is, of course, going to be the first of a series of town halls as we continue throughout this year. As you may recall, that in November, when I did the state of the city, the financial state of the city, I stated to you that we would be doing town halls going forward because there had been so many questions about the finances of the city. And so we will continue to do that throughout the remainder of this year as we proceed to provide as much information as we possibly can for transparency and accountability to you as the residents of the city of Mount Vernon. So let us first open up this with prayer. God, we thank you for allowing us to be here today. We thank you for your traveling mercy. And God, we ask that you bless the city, bless every aspect of the city. This we pray in thy name. Amen. 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 So, first of all, I want to say to you, thank you for your years of support and commitment to me as the comptroller of the city for now what is the last 3 years, in which we have worked together to move the city in a positive direction, despite all of the challenges and the struggles that have beset us. I am proud of the things that we've been able to accomplish, recognizing that we have not accomplished all that we should accomplish, and that there is so much more to go. So in the last 3 years, in my role, I have done the best that I could diligently to ensure that we are moving in a positive direction fiscally and financially. There have been some challenges and some setbacks, of course, throughout these last 3 years, and we acknowledge and recognize them. I think that what most people know, at least I hope that what they know about me and my leadership in this city, is that always my focus has been to do the best that I could and do right by the city, regardless of what the challenges may have been. I think that also what you also would be able to categorize as a part of my leadership in the city is that I have been responsive to the needs of the constituents as they have requested and called. I think that my office has become an office that is available and transparent in our operations as we move forward to the city. So let us start off with the most recent and probably the most concerning of issues that has faced us in the city regarding the finances of our city. That on January 7th, that we actually experienced a financial breach in our bank account. That was a result of a combination of a few things. It was absolutely a phishing and a electronic wire transfer fraud. There was a number of things that happened, and I'm going to speak as much as I can to it at this point that happened. One, in the notifications that came to us. One of the things that we had done is originally had set out for there to be this multi-level kind of communication that happens, the multi-level approvals on things and notifications. And so when we also did receive this notification about that there had been some transactions that had happened on the account. First of all, I did not know exactly which account it was. I did not know if it was even the city's account or private accounts. And so we began to kind of look around and see exactly what was the activities on it. Originally attempted to also log into our system. At first, I could not get into our system, and I had to then also then change the password through the appropriate channels of changing the password on it. We got a second notice about some transactions in which I attempted to contact our representatives at the bank. I did not get through to the representatives at the bank. I left a message for them and became very, very concerned about what was happening there. In response to the notification that we had got, we responded by saying absolutely no to it. At that point, we became very, very concerned, so then we responded to it, and it was on the phone with a representative that had purported themselves actually as being a fraud unit representative of Chase. And that person then began to began to ask me in particular a series of questions. And I refused to actually give one. So contrary to what I think has been said, I did not give my password and I did not give my username on it, to anyone on it, right? But we could not, again, get into the system. So when I became very concerned about it and became a little bit suspicious to us, I then used my cell phone to then attempt to call our representative. And again, we did not get an answer. They weren't there. So I then emailed them on my email to say, we have this fraudulent activity that has been reported to us, and that we also now have not been able to get into the system itself. Give me a call. When we received the call back from the bank representative, our representative, we were on the call with him. We tried to then, he said to us, well, ask the person their name. We were back and forth with this communication between what is our representative and this impersonator of it. At that point, the bank was now in the background, looking to see what was happening on the account. And we began to observe that there was transactions that were happening immediately run behind each other in that, which is when we started to intercede and to stop the transactions that occurred on it. We were able to actually stop 6 of the transactions to go through. 7 of them, as you know, as have been reported before, had gone through, and we had begun immediately to reach out to banks, meaning that our bank had begun to immediately reach out to banks that the money had been kind of transferred to. And then at that point, we started our process of recovery as best as we could. Until we reported it, of course, to the Mount Vernon Police Department. I also filed with the federal government, FBI. I filed also a complaint report around it with all of the details around the transfers and everything else. And so what we've been doing is working with the bank, working with the FBI, the fraud complaint unit for the last few weeks on this, actually tracking and recovering money. We know that we've been able to identify where some of the money has been transferred and also to freeze some accounts. We don't know what the levels of that are at this point because money has basically hopped, all right, from bank to bank to bank. So that's where we are as it pertains to what is happening as it pertains to the recovery, talking with the bank, talking even with the FBI wire fraud unit about it, and this is going to take some time. And what they tell me is it can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days before we know exactly what we have recovered in the midst of it. In addition to that, we have also notified our insurance company, and we're working with them. We have several different layers of insurance as it pertains to cyber insurance. We also have, of course, general kind of liability insurance and all of those insurance policies. So at the end, we won't know what we have recovered, how much of it that we actually have recovered, how much of it actually will be covered by any insurance, if any of it will be covered by any insurance. What have we done since then? Well, one, we have changed some of our internal protocols, and two, changed some of our protocols even with our bank. We have increased the number of notifications that we were receiving, because one of the things that we also were not able to do was that, as I said before, was to access our actual portal, and nor were we actually receiving emails, because our emails had been, my email had been inundated. I had over 200 emails that was flooding my emails with supposed subscriptions that I had not signed up for at all at any point in time, which we believe was a tactic to try to distract us from actually identifying what was actually going on at that particular time. So the things that we have done to change our protocols. One of the things that we did is that we also, with the bank, we have changed the notifications so that, one, there's a wait period time for our actual wire transfers to go out, and that there needs to be actually not only a secondary notification, but there needs to be a receipt of the notification that, one, has been approved, and then two, that it also has been actually requested, and then two, it has also been approved. What we also have done is implemented some new training. We were working with the bank that is going to also sit with also our staff to talk about fraud training, talk about phishing tactics, and that now have come up, new tactics that keep on coming up as this has become a very sophisticated operation that oftentimes they are switching up kind of the tactics around what it is that they are doing. We've upgraded our bank security measures, which we've worked closely with the bank on those security protocols, ensuring that all bank transactions are protected by the latest technology. We've also changed all passwords, all passcodes. We've added a secondary level of security for those passwords. I've already stated that we've also done training, and we've also increased the multi-level notifications around our bank accounts. This is an unfortunate situation in which, of course, I, as the comptroller, immediately have been transparent, sent out a notice immediately to the public. I then also communicated with the community, and I have never stepped away from responsibility around the issue. At the end of the day, I'm the comptroller, and my responsibility is to safeguard the city's money. And this is obviously a setback in my leadership and my position at the city. However, I am confident that we will continue to do well and even do better than what we have done before, with all of these measures in place, with all of the training that is going to be happening, and all of the new technologies. Oh, the other thing I did not tell you is also we did also work with our IT department because there had been several different challenges going on with our computers, even to the standpoint of that sometimes there was this constant kind of shutting down the systems and all of that. So a number of things was happening here. I wanted to start with that. So I wanted to make sure that I put it up front and be able to allow you also to ask any questions around that issue before I move into the other items that I know that you have of concern. So at this point, I'm going to open up the floor for questions around the fraud matter. Are there any questions at this time?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I really need that? Okay. Yeah, I have a question. Comptroller Morton, and thank you for actually taking questions here. You said we several times. I just want to know who all was involved in the decision process. When this went down, you said we and not I, and then the other, so that would be one thing. You mentioned I had questions about the insurance and what would be covered and if the company would fight it, but you seem to answer that. And it sounds like we did not have two-factor identification or confirmation of wires beforehand, like a delay. I mean, I have that in my account for anything over a very small amount because I'm.
So hold on, let me answer because you got a number. So one, yes. So involved in the decisions and what was happening around this particular fraud was myself and the chief and one of the chief accountants were engaged in it. Two is that we did have multiple, but that's why I said we, because actually both of us actually ended up as a part of what was the phishing fraud kind of the issue around it. So both of our profiles had been compromised, which is what then created the problem.
Yeah, and then the other question is that just concerns me is that it sounds like there wasn't two-factor identification or like delays and double checking for outgoing wire transfers, which I know I have in all of my accounts.
And you are correct. That's why I said to you that the one other layer that we put into place is that now there was this waiting. There has to now be this waiting period that happens. So now if you initiate it, it has to wait, and then for someone else now to then approve it, and then we get the notifications. And two, that there also was not what we did not have at this particular bank, which we have at two of our others, is that the minute that a wire is actually initiated, there's an email that comes to multiple people, right? We did not have that, unfortunately, at this bank, right? Now, thank you. But now we do. We added that. Yes. Next question. Over on this side.
Thank you for your transparency, Comptroller. My question is, when a wire goes out, isn't it possible for the bank to reverse the wire in a certain period of time? And has the bank made any indication that they could make the city whole based on what happened?
Well, yes. Well, to answer the question, it goes along the same. At that particular time, we did not have that feature in place where there was this waiting period for it, and two, so it had been completed. Once it's completed, it's now a matter of going to the other bank to try to retrieve it, right, on that. And no, there is, at this point, it's best faith effort, which is why we also are working with the bank, which we've gotten some communication from the bank and secondary banks. And then two, we're working with the FBI fraud wire unit on it. Any other questions?
You mentioned the insurance companies and seeking maybe some coverage for this. If this was the result of human error, right, if safeguards weren't taken, what are the odds that we're going to be made whole for the loss here?
Probably unlikely, to be honest, and with it, which is why we're doing a very aggressive efforts to try to do this, specifically working with, again, the FBI on this issue because of that. Because the bank has but a limited amount of ability to be able to do it. So immediately what our bank representative suggested, well, I guess you should say directed me to do, was to then engage the FBI through filing a form and complaint and giving all the details around what has happened, which is what we're doing. In fact, I just got finished talking to him just about 15 minutes ago to see what was the recent updates. We know that there are some banks that we've identified, some funds that have been frozen. We just don't know what. We're waiting to get back from these banks what the amounts are. Any other questions? So, ladies and gentlemen, let me say this to you. I know that in the political world, I'm just going to be transparent, in the political world, that it's suggested that your elected officials will hide and not tell you the truth. I'm just giving you all of the facts around what has occurred as far as I know it now. We know that the police, the DA, and also now the FBI are involved in this. And so we will follow this through, and we will continue to give you updates and information as it pertains to responsibility and human error, right? Around this issue, at the end of the day, the responsibility falls with me. And I accept that, right? But I do believe that you know that given all that I have done and continue to do for the city, that I will continue to improve our measures. I will continue to put forth the responsibility to ensure that we safeguard our assets of the city. Okay? If there are any other questions, you can always email me at comptroller@mountvernon.ny.gov. Okay? All right. Moving on to the next topic or the presentation, that I want to go through a few items, and then I want to give you opportunity to ask me questions, and to be able to also not only ask questions, but to also provide some observations and some suggestions around what you may think we need to do. So, first of all, in the last 3 years, we have completed 11 quarterly reports. We have not missed one. The quarterly reports are a little challenging, especially the last one, because the information that it asks, sometimes all of the information is not in. That's why I continue to put on the reports as unaudited, because what you're going to end up seeing from the final reports is going to probably be a little different than what you have seen in the unaudited reports, because revenue tends to lag behind. Especially when you're dealing with things like grants and things of that sort that don't necessarily come in on a timely fashion. We also have completed our 16, 17, and 18 3 audits. 19 is in quality check right now. We got our management letter. We're reviewing that. We got to do an action plan on that. You will also notice that in the 18 that there was a budget deficit. 19 is going to be a budget deficit, right? And around that, and I can probably anticipate that 20 is probably going to have some of that as well, because that was the COVID year. It probably won't start to begin to turn around, or at least come in evenly, until somewhere around about 21, 22. We have aggressive schedule, but here's what our challenges are. As you know, the charter now requires that I, as the comptroller, ensure that the agencies also get their reports done, but also if agencies are receiving federal money, it has to be a part of our single audit report. And because of that, it often delays if the city is ready and the agencies are not, we can't issue the city. So we've been working hard with our agencies to try to ensure that those agency reports get done. So we're looking, go back. So we're looking at roughly around about March of 2025 for 20, and for 21, April and May, and for 22, June. All right. And again, like what happened with 19, which was supposed to be done by the end of November, it got pushed back. Depending on what's happening with our agency reports, these dates may very well change. We've completed 3 of our New York State annual financial reports with the State Comptroller's Office. We're trying to catch up with them. We cannot get those finished any faster than the audits because we need to make sure that the audits are done in order to submit them. So what you'll find is that those are on a parallel track, right, as we go. But we are getting them done and we are submitting them. URA is done up through 18. Their 19 is also with our 19 now because we just finally got a final review for them and for their federal grants. Water Department is up to 19. They are now dealing with 20, and their 20 was having some challenges and difficulties because they changed software packages, and there seemed to be a conflict in some of their data. URA is done through 2023. We have just begun for 2024 to be done. Moving on. 2025 budget. 2025 budget got approved at 3.6%. But I also stated, and I will continue to emphasize, that the 2025 budget is a very, very tight budget and has to be managed extremely well by the mayor and department heads. Our office has put in mechanisms to identify where they are off targets, either way, positively or negatively. We are giving out monthly reports to every department and to the council. We have partnered with the mayor and the council to make sure that we are reviewing all of these reports, and if there are any anomalies or any outliers, that we are going to have to deal with them quickly. We've also instructed the department heads that they need to look for a leaner operation, right? And that through even procurement, that they need to ensure that we're getting best prices for them, because we cannot afford for us to just be going to the same vendors because we like the vendor if there's a better price on those. Concerns. Revenue targets have been a concern for me. I've articulated it several years. It is really a concern now because now we have at least 3 years of data that shows that there's a consistent trend in certain areas where revenue is not meeting its target. If you look at the budget, you will also identify that there are places where we have actually decreased the revenue lines, and that was also in response to the report that came from the State Comptroller's Office that said that oftentimes we were inflating our revenue numbers, and therefore we were not having realistic budgets. So we gradually have been trying to align those numbers. But now we have at least 3 years of data that absolutely shows us. You will notice that also in this year's budget, that also I put in the actuals for you, so you can begin to see those yourself. The areas of major concern for revenue is Memorial Field, it's parking, meters and permits, is the rent with sewer rents, you know, and that is the sewer fee, building department fees, and the county transportation. Next slide. Those are areas in which have historically not met what was identified in the budget as the target. Half of our tax collected in January is approximately around about, I guess, $36 million, somewhere around about that. Realizing that sales tax through March is somewhere around about $7 million that comes in. And this is a cash flow kind of thing. I want to make sure that you understand how this cash flow works for us. And why, for my department, the front end of our year is a very financially stressed period. $15 million we have to write a check for by Friday. And that is for retirement, because it is due to the state. If we don't write it, then like that first year that I was comptroller and we didn't have the money, and I ended up having to go into a payment plan with them over the course of the year, because if you don't meet the deadline, they start to charge you somewhere like $2,000 a day, $2,200 or something like that dollars a day on it if you don't pay it. It's an astronomical amount, and so therefore we have to pay it. The real cost is 17.8. Right? But we amortize it. When they make it available, we amortize it so that we don't have to dish out the $17.8 million. Now there's a way in which we could avoid this, because there's a discounted period. If we had the cash in our fund balance in December, we could pay it in December at a discounted rate, right? But that has not happened in Mount Vernon for several years, because we don't have any fund balance for us to be able to prepay it so that it's at a lower rate. So therefore, we have to amortize, but it is a large expense in the first 2 months, not even 2 months, but almost first month of the year. Health costs was $6.6 million. And we have talked about, and I am preparing legislation to change the health care options. One for, of course, we talked about this, the elected and the appointed, and for the part-timers. We changed our part-timers back in 2000, I think in 12 or 14. We upped the number. But what Mount Vernon has is Mount Vernon had that if you are a full-time person making $25,000 a year and you meet a year mark, that we offer full insurance. Offering full insurance costs more than the $25,000 that the person is making a year, right? Which was the same problem that happened in 2012 when it was $10,000. And under former Comptroller Maureen Walker, it got moved up to 25. Now it's time for us to look at this and find out what we have to offer, if we even have to offer, inclusive of taking advantage of the healthcare marketplace and seeing if that's the first option before we actually have to give any insurance to part-timers. But we have our finance and benefits person right now looking at all of those options so that we can then put those forward to the council expeditiously. Payroll through March, $17.4 million. So you see our cash flow here, which is why it becomes a challenge for us in the first part of the year, and important for the non-tax revenue lines to actually meet their targets earlier on. If we had a fund balance, then we would be able to float some of this until the rest of the money came in later, but that is not the case presently in Mount Vernon. Move on. Debt management. So we do have our annual payments for debt management. It did go down this year to $1.5 million. We've got a series of bans that we actually did take out, as you already know, $3.2 million for several different projects in which we have and are continuing to execute now. We did also do, of course, the $15.8 million for the CSEA 456 and Teamsters. And remember, and again, there's been some concern around that, and I understand the concern, but the reality is that if we did not do this, then the unions were not they did not agree to have a long payment period on that. And we learned from the fire arbitration issue that not only do we end up spending money in fighting it, but we also spend money in having to pay for the statutory interest on things. And if we did agree to pay this amount in, let's even say 3 years, that would have been a $5 million uptick on the annual budget, right? And that translates to a double-digit tax increase on it. So, talking to bond counsel, because we did consult with bond counsel, we chose to go this option instead, which is a ban for 5 years, in which, yes, we are paying the interest, which amounts to about $800,000, $900,000, which actually we had in the budget. We had in a budget line already for unions to cover that cost on an annual basis for up to 5 years, and then we can convert it to a ban. By that time, I believe we will have our credit rating back and be able to get a much lower kind of rate in a bond, convert it to a bond rather. TAN, we were running on a short flow, similar to that at the school district. Also last year, we both were experiencing this short flow in the latter part of the year. And so to hold us over, we ended up doing a 6.5 TAN, which we're collecting the taxes now on that to pay that back this year. Moving on. There's been a lot of conversation about art and what we have done, and there's been some conversation around that we've mismanaged it. There's no reports, there's no indications that has happened in Mount Vernon. In fact, we submitted all of our quarterly reports to the U.S. Treasury on the art money. We are now completing the final quarterly report that is due this Friday, and it will show that we spent $34 million, almost $35 million, and that there's about $6.3 million that now has been obligated. Some of that obligation is even in police officers and firefighters' positions. There's some other projects that are also attached to that, technology projects, as well as some capital projects that are attached to that fall underneath the eligibility. What we are now doing is ensuring, working with our grants department, that we have all of the appropriate documentation, because I've made it clear that we do not want to have to pay back any money. We cannot afford to have to pay back any money, all right, to the federal government. Now, y'all know that there was an executive order yesterday which actually has put us in a frenzy. We don't know how that's going to affect this. The difference is that we actually do have this money, and just so you know, there was a separate account for this money so that once we did not transfer it over until we used it, because this money technically is listed as a liability until we actually use it, and then it's transferred over. Next slide. Our liabilities when I came in was $62 million. The liabilities currently are approximately around about $30 million. That's outside of course, our bans. But we do have two very major lawsuits that are under appeal. The Kayla case and also the Mega Beverage case that are currently under appeal at this time. Let's go. We look at our tax liabilities, which many of y'all are tax revenue. So we've not reevaluated our properties in 60 years. We've not done that in 60 years. We need to do that. We're going to look for ways to fund that as well, because we're having more and more folks that are coming in for certiorars and coming in for tax reductions on properties that we know have a different value on them, but the city has not done that as of yet. 95%, which is the lowest amount, which was last year. Other than that, we've really had our tax collection at the 96, 97% throughout the years as it pertains to what our percentage of collection has been. And so we've done a good job at actually collecting the taxes. Go back to the other slide for a moment. and then we can come back. Okay, so the property tax 95%. The shortfall, of course, impacts the city and the school district when we're not able to collect all of our taxes. The school district too has also been collecting at a rate that's not, that again is not 100%, but their taxes then come over to us after the warrant ends, and then we work together for 2 years to try to collect this. And if not, then it creates a problem for us. And if we can't collect the school district's taxes and can't collect our taxes, we become responsible for paying the school district's tax after a 2-year period by law. Moving on to the next. Here are the top revenue areas for the city. Sales tax, state revenue sharing, that's what they call state aid, right? The refuse fee, transfer tax, parking fees, right? Mortgage tax. We oftentimes get large amounts on our interest on property tax because the folks are not paying it. Then we get the interest that comes in on that, and then building permits. And that's been in like the last 2 years, building permits. But while building permits are up, there are other fees that are happening in the building department that are down, right? And so it becomes this kind of balancing act. Next slide. Underperforming. All right, we end up we have a line in there where we have this transportation cost for prisoners. We have absentee landlords we have not collected that at a significant rate. We also, safety inspections, as you know, there was a movement last year by the administration to now start doing some of these inspections that they had not done for like 30 years or so. Criminal fines are down, which kind of makes sense because there's been a change in the law, right? As to why that went down based upon what had been estimated. So now that we have data, we're able to make those adjustments. Public safety permits and sewer charges that we talked about before, as well as parking meter, right? So there's a difference because there's these fees that happen, right, on the positive side, which is the tax collection, which happens in the parking bureau, right? I mean, it has an impact the parking collection in over by where the police department is. But then there's also the parking bureau, which is people actually paying at the meters, right? That and what I tried to explain also to the mayor and the council too is that that's kind of a balancing act, right? If people pay at the meter, you won't have as many parking tickets. If people don't pay at the meter, then you got more parking tickets, right? So we had to look at the data to try to find an appropriate balance for what we should be budgeting that makes sense, right? On it. Street opening fees. Those are the fees in which we charge construction folks, Con Ed, all of them to open up our streets, in which what was projected to come in that is not what had been coming in. Next. Here's some other areas. Franchise taxes, which is like your cable, right? And we've been talking about a cable contract and the need for a cable contract, which we need to make sure that we do get that cable contract executed, because that has been down. But then part of it also is that many folks have gone away from cable and going to streaming. So we may very well need to have to just adjust what that projection is going forward. We already talked about street opening fees, Memorial Field. Again, I think the mayor and the council are looking at a different kind of financial model for Memorial Field to make those adjustments. In addition to that, parking permits. As I think we talked about, I already talked about that. Just wanted to give you all the percentages of what we're looking at. Next. So, there's been a lot of conversation about old taxes and taxes in arrears. This chart is taken straight out of a letter that I sent to the city council with the list of delinquent taxes. At the time in which I sent the letter, which was about a few weeks ago, beginning of January, there were now $52 million worth of outstanding tax revenue. That's inclusive of the tax, the interest, and the penalties, right? 16 million of it actually includes the taxes that we received from the school district for 2020 through 2022, right? Because that now becomes part of the old taxes that are due, right? It breaks down into these levels. Of that, we had about 173 parcels that requested an installment plan, right? And that's about 17 or almost $18 million. Commercial. Now, the rest of them are folks that have not asked for a payment plan or have not responded, right? So, commercial, non-residential, 10.6. Residential, having taxes that go back 5 or more years, is about 9.9. Residential under 5 years is about 3. Right? Open tax items. Now these are folks that there is something wrong with the records, and we have not yet been able to completely reconcile what has happened with these records. Now there's probably 1 or 2 of them that are in there that actually had some large amounts. But you will see that those are items that have been existing for a very long time, because there was no way in the world that there could have been interest on that to that amount unless the tax is so old that the interest has now compounded for several decades. Okay? And because we don't have the documentation in there, we've been reaching out to the actual property owner. We've been trying to reconcile that amount to figure out what is. But because the law says that if we have a conflict and an issue, I have to separate that out on the list. You see it here. And then there are those that are right now in the court situation. Okay? Moving on. So, there's been a lot of conversation about the foreclosure and what the process is. First of all, the foreclosure process is not easy, right? It's very complicated and it takes some time, right? It's not as quick as everybody believes it to be. One is that it takes approximately about 2 years. We've not done this process since the last time we actually had an in-rem was in 2000, that full in-rem was 2014. There was an in-rem that happened in 15, but it did not get complete, right? And so and a lot of reasons why this has not happened is because of financial challenges. There's a global pandemic. There was just some upheaval in the Comptroller's office. So that's clearly some of the factors that contributed to why this is taking so long to get to this place. Next. So, those that ask for a payment plan, there's a new payment plan now structured that was approved by the council and by the state recently that now allow, the previous one was that they had to put down 25%. They had a maximum of 2 years in order to pay it off. Given the amount of money that is owed on these properties, there was no way that it would have been feasible for folks to do this at all. So looking at some of our neighboring communities, and what they may have offered, we've come up with a different payment plan that has 3 different kinds of options. One, it has you have to put down 10% on whatever it is that you owe. Second, well, let me go with one. One, you gotta be current. So you can't be, you cannot have outstanding taxes for the last 2 years. They must be paid, right? And if you have anything that is outstanding, that particularly is right now in collection with the school district, it has to be paid. The city does not have the ability to waive any interest on school taxes that do not belong to the city. The city can waive taxes, waive interest and penalties on taxes that are school taxes, but where we have already paid the school district and made them whole. All right? And so, when you look at this now, there's a period that can be up to 10 years, up to, not automatic 10, right? It can be up to 10 years to pay it off if you are a senior at 40% AMI, which is really enhanced star eligibility. If you are residential, you can have up to 5 years. And if you are commercial, you can have up to 3. So somebody asked the question, how do you determine who gets 1, who gets 2, who gets 3? I'm going to have to come up with a recommendation for the council so that we can make it standard across the board based upon some criteria. That's what we're going to plan to do. Next. So, when we look at the school district, oh, wait a minute, let me go back a minute. So, I have given the list to the city council. The city council, by law, had to have it sit on their desk for 1 week, for one meeting, but at least 7 days. They did that. And on Monday, they voted on that list. So now that list is back in my hands. What I now have to do is I have to now prepare the final list. I have to file it with the county finance department. I have to file it with the corporation council, and I have to also publish it for a certain amount of weeks in the newspaper and make it available then in my office. That's the step. So I've been getting a number of calls asking me to release it. I cannot release it just yet. I got a few legal steps that I have to go through to release it, but it's going to be released shortly because now it has been approved. Okay, moving on. School district. At present, we, from the $11.7 million that was owed to the school district for 2017 through 19, we now have a balance of $3.9 million inclusive of the interest. So it was 11.7 plus a 2.1 statutory interest, right? We are paying the school district $450,000 every month, whether we collect on it or not, right? Which again affects the city's cash flow, that if we don't collect it from the taxpayers, we still have to give it to the school district per the agreement. Right? 10.3 million already paid in the combo of the principal and the interest. And that debt will be completely paid off September 2025 based upon the $400,000 monthly payments. Moving on. This is just, we're going to come back to it. You have an opportunity for a question when we come back. We don't have to come, right? So this is kind of like a breakdown now of the current debt. So in addition to that, we also have that the school district also gave over to us the taxes that they were unable to collect for 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023, right? After their warrant had closed, right? We are in the midst of collecting. Now, some of you know that you're going to the school district to pay for the taxes, and some of y'all are coming to us to pay for the taxes, because we have agreed to allow the school district to collect these taxes during this period to make it more convenient for the taxpayer. And what we're doing on a monthly basis is doing a reconciliation between the city and the school district to ensure that we are keeping up with how much is owed. Myself and the assistant superintendent for business will be meeting over the next few weeks to again look at all of the data to make sure that we can reconcile it and be prepared for May. Because in May 2020, 2021, 2021, 2022, whatever the balance is left on that we've received from the school district, we will then be obligated to have to pay the school district, which is why we are aggressively going after that money, because to be honest, the city does not have the cash flow to really dish out money that it has not received. All right? In February of 2026, right, the 2022, 2023 will be due to the school district. Okay? All right, moving on. Additional kinds of revenue that we have in the budget for this year is cannabis. We are finalizing the RFP for the red light camera program, and we are in the midst of negotiating the franchise contracts next. That's it. Okay. So that's all that I wanted to at least present to you, and now give you the opportunity to ask me questions about this information or anything else that you have right now that you wish to ask. Yes, Gabriel, you were getting ready to ask a question. We need to go back to that slide. What was it that you asked? And I will say this, what we will do is make this available on the website, okay? So you can have it as well.
That would be wonderful. One of the things is about the insurance, that the electeds and appointed, well, I guess in 2014, the CSEA, Teamsters electeds and appointeds decided that they don't have to contribute anything to their health care.
You said in 2014?
2014, the collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters, CSEA, and I don't know when it started in City Hall, you guys pay zero into the healthcare. We pay 100% for family, for individual, which is bonkers. I mean, I know a lot of us in November just went through our healthcare choices with an employer, and we know how much we pay out of our paychecks. Mm-hmm. And my father was a lifelong government employee, he also paid out of his paycheck, every check. And somehow the bureaucrats in Mount Vernon, which is a poor city, decided that they should have paid zero. And the Teamsters and CSEA, I believe, if I'm correct, 456.
You're saying, okay, hold on a minute. So you're saying that in 2014, there was a negotiation in which they decided that they were not going to pay in 2014?
That's the most recent collective bargaining agreement that I've seen where that was the case.
Yeah, okay, well, again, what I will say is this, that historically, the employees had not paid. What had happened is, what I do know, is that in the police and the fire negotiation, that they then they agreed to the 20%. I was not here, so I don't know exactly how that occurred, but yes, now at this point, and again, as you and I have already talked about, I said that before we could even approach 456 and CSEA, we had to deal with the elected and the appointed, right? We have been having, just a moment, we've been having this discussion. What I don't want to do is to give the impression that there has not been an active discussion around this issue with 456 and with CSEA. There has. We have agreed that we are going to make that change for the elected and for the appointed. So
Okay.
we're moving in that
Okay,
direction.
I agree. My question was, why has it been years, and why hasn't it been since I raised this issue publicly and privately with several people in government when I found out about this, and that the police and fire, I said, this is like ridiculous. This is obscene.
I can't answer that question for you. I can only, right? So
Well, I mean, as comptroller for the last 3 years.
Right, but again, as comptroller, what I said to you is that I actually did introduce it. We had this discussion. I had the discussion with the council, had a discussion with the mayor. They've had discussions with us. So yes, I am working on that right now.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and then you mentioned the part-time and the 10,000, the 25,000, and that may explain when I look at our costs in our budget for payroll, and then I look at the benefits, it's obscenely high. And two reasons could be that we have a lot of part-time in our budget. Like some recreation line items, it's like $500,000. It's the largest.
Right.
And then the 100% of healthcare would explain those high costs. So
well, actually, no.
what are you going to do to raise?
So
what is the process to raise that threshold so that people aren't working? So it's not used as a nepotism, friends and family network. Give a part-time job, makes 20, and then gets $40,000 in benefits. How are you going to do that? And are you going to index it to inflation?
So, okay, so one, the majority, the higher percentage of our part-timers are not eligible for insurance. They don't make $25,000. There is a small number of those, and I would venture to tell you that's probably under 20, 30 people, right, that are in that category, right? That's number one. The process for doing that is, as I explained earlier, I have my finance and benefits person also looking at, or currently, what are also the regulations around our responsibility to part-timers, and second, what are the options that we now can put into a referral letter that I'm sending to the council, along with the change of the percentage for the percentage for elected and appointed to pay.
Just FYI, 30 people is $1.32 million in benefits a year.
30 people.
Because you said it was about $40,000 for.
No, that's not. No, you can't do it. You can't do quick math like that, because you can't do quick math that way, because it depends upon whether it's single or it is family. And I could easily look at the number and tell you what the amount is.
That'd be great.
But again, I'm agreeing with you, which is why we're moving to change it. Okay? All right.
Is anybody else?
Hey, so I just want to thank you for your presentation. First question is, will the information in regards to the Mount Vernon City School District be presented at one of the meetings that's held on South Columbus?
So actually, the assistant superintendent of business and I also had agreed when we met in December that we would plan a joint presentation that would occur at the school district. And right now, that date is tentatively set for August. He sent me an email and said March 8th. I believe that's the date. So the short answer to the question is yes. The date, I believe, is March 8th.
Okay, second question, what is the absentee landlord fees? What does that mean? What is absentee landlord fees?
So absentee landlord is that you own the property, you don't live there, and you're renting it. So there's a fee, there's an actual fee that you have to pay, which I believe might be $100 a year. Yeah, I'm just going to tell you what it is. If you go look in the charter, you probably will see it, right? It says $100 a year for absentee landlord fee is what I believe. And unfortunately, I think we've not collected more than 50% of what probably should have been due in that annually. Yes.
Well, I heard you say there are $50+ million of tax arrears owed to the city. I'm assuming that's in residential and commercial combined. So putting the commercial to the side. In terms of residential, I think it's fantastic that there's a payment plan program being offered, because as a realtor, I think as many people can stay in their homes as possible is a great thing. Some of those folks are going to have to be foreclosed because they're past the point of having a payment plan. Some of those folks can have a short sale to save themselves from foreclosure so they can save their economic future in case they want to buy something in the future. I submitted a proposal to the city council to allow the city council to dispose of assets that the city would take in foreclosure with the help of realtors. So my question is, would the city be open, or would the controller's office be open to having realtors assist the city in helping some of those people short sale their homes instead of being foreclosed on, or if they are foreclosed on, allowing us to implement a plan that puts those properties back in the hands of Mount Vernon residents or city employees or people who are owner occupants as opposed to corporations?
So, one, let me try to bring some clarity. So when you look at my breakout, $10.6 million is commercial, non-residential. The residential that you're talking about who have not requested a payment plan are basically the the $14 million, right? Those that have more than 5 years worth of taxes and those that have less than 5 years of taxes, right? For those folks. Now, because those folks, anybody below the first line, excluding the last two lines, so the commercial, the residential, more than 5, under 5, we've sent 4, maybe 5 notices since I've been comptroller. Those people are there because they have not responded to our notices, right? So now, the issue at hand is that if once we now have created the list, it becomes a public list. And if those individuals wish to now engage in a program that will allow them to have a short sale on their property, absolutely. What I think that the question would be is it appropriate for the city to connect with realtors to do that, or is it appropriate for the realtors to come together and design a program and the city provide the owners with the information, right? I think that's the question. So I think if you want to really have further discussion about it, I think that you, me, and maybe the Corporation Council need to meet. What I don't want to do is to put the city in a position where it looks like the city now is trying to influence or muscle a person to do something with their home. That would be my only concern. So I think we need to find out from legal what would be appropriate. But at the end of the day, any option that we can come up with to give information to them, for them to stay in their home or get the value out of the home is what we want to do.
I appreciate that. And one thing I want to bring to the city's attention is that the number of corporations purchasing home in Mount Vernon and outside of Mount Vernon is rapidly increasing. About a third of every home now is being purchased by a corporation for rental. And so owner occupants are being squeezed out by companies. And so the city must take precaution now in order for residents to continue owning homes, or they will be priced out of that process and be renters into the future. The city has to have a proposal, or the proposal that I submitted, the city has to have a procedure that gives owner occupants an advantage over corporations in bidding on city properties, or this will become a problem into the future.
So now you've moved to a different element, because one, we're talking about properties right now that the city actually would not own, right? It still would be in the hands of the actual home owner. So that's one program in which what you're recommending. Got it. As it pertains to what the city's process will be pertaining to if it forecloses on those properties and then has to do an auction on those properties is a different animal, right? Which we can talk about too, what that also means, right? Because what I get is emails all day telling me what is right and what is wrong in the city and what corruption the city is doing and even my office is doing that I have no clue. So I'll give you an example. So I get an email the other day to tell me that there is some program that the city is talking about in order to land bank properties and give it to employees. And I'm like, where did that come from? Right? I'm like, I know nothing about that. One, the city does not have any properties right now to even think about doing that. And even if it did, based upon the process for foreclosure, it won't be for 2 years for that, right? So I agree, we need to come up with strategies to ensure that homeowners remain in their homes, right? Which is one of the reasons why I have very meticulously taken my time to double check, triple check, quadruple check this information before now it has been out, because the stuff has just been all over the place. So we can talk further about what those may be, but the city is open to make sure that we give our homeowners every advantage for them to stay in their homes or get value out of their homes, and to have choices about what they need to do.
So first of all, I want to thank you. It's a host of information that you've given, maybe overwhelming for a lot of people, especially when you start talking about money, but in the aspects of foreclosure. Once you drop the list, is that how you worded it?
Once I make the list available, once the list becomes public, yes.
Once the list becomes public, what happens then? Is there a 90, 30, 120, 365 days of waiting? But when you drop the list, when you make the list public, what does that mean?
So when I make the list public, it says that we have now, per the law, identified that these properties are 2 years or more in arrears. That's what it says, right? And that we now have the city, through the city council, through my submission to the city council and the submitted city council's vote, has now approved for us to move forward with a foreclosure and or a tax lien sale. Now, the charter in section 162 lays out the process for tax lien sale, which the city has in modern time never done, right? There is, for the in rem foreclosure procedure, it is governed by Article 783, which is the city's state law for foreclosure. So let me take it two ways. Let me go foreclosure first. List is out, foreclosure. I now must file that list with the Corporations Counsel's office, with the Westchester Tax Office, right? I must then also make that list available for anybody to come to inspect in my office, right? Or through the website, whichever way it is, for them to come. What people do, I don't have any control over, right? Because this is the point that I think that Mr. Hollingsworth was making, right? Is that now you're gonna have people, including companies, that are gonna have that list, and they're gonna now start going to our seniors and trying to now swindle them out of their property. You may very well have that, right? Well, you also will have programs. You may have programs like to say, you need to go over here and look at this program, and you may be able to sell it, right? Because I now have filed it with the Corporations Counsel's office and with the county tax office, the Corporation Counsel, either someone in his office or someone that he contracts, will then start to prepare the actual list for us to file it for foreclosure with the court. Right? So there's time, right? This is happening while all sorts of other stuff may very well be happening. But the city will then follow with the court. We'll have to go through the court proceedings. We have to notify, we have to once again, in the part of that process, send notices to everyone, to the owner. We'll have to send notices to any potential heirs of it that we may know of. We have a due notice process that takes some time for us to inform them that we're foreclosing on their property, or it's our intent to foreclose on their property. That will go through the complete process, And then once the court now has then awarded title, right, to the comptroller then will then turn over title to the city. And the city then will then choose to auction, the city will then auction off those properties that he has taken title for. That's foreclosure. Tax lien is that same thing. So the list now is published, it is out. According to the tax lien section, now the way that it is written in there, it requires us now to determine which of the properties on this delinquent list we're going to do tax lien sale for versus foreclosure, right? Right? And we are finalizing that criteria. We had a preliminary agreement that anything with commercial and anything 5 years or more was going tax lien. Residential under 5, foreclosure, right? That was a preliminary discussion. We have not finalized that yet, right? But whatever is now chosen as the criteria for tax lien will then be part of that tax lien process where we once again will have to, according to the charter now, we will have to then set a date with the list, and on that date anybody can come in and bid on that tax lien according to the way the process is now. Because that process is so convoluted in the way in which it's written, I had asked the Corporation Council and even the Charter Revision Commission to look at that section to make recommendations. And I met with them last week. We looked at it, and we have pretty much agreed that the best course of action probably would be with this section is to edit that section and adopt the state's process for tax lien sale, which then, if we do that, it will allow us to also be able to do tax lien sale by contract, which means that what we would do is an RFP as a process. Those are the two different processes. So so both of them have very complicated, kind of very precise kind of steps that need to be taken in order for us to basically offload the tax lien. Yes, question here, and then I'll come back to you, Gabriel.
I want to turn your attention to the Mount Vernon Industrial Development Agency, if we can do that. You're the treasurer of the Mount Vernon Industrial Development Agency.
Yes.
You, as you know, I track the IDA pretty closely. I have for several years. I think this is a real problem for the city. That agency is supposed to be a tool used for economic development in the city. Instead, it has been used to give long-term, 30 years and sometimes longer, large tax abatements, mostly to housing developers, at an enormous cost to the city's coffers, tax coffers. To give you, for example, I've tracked since 2016 to 2022, real property taxes that should have been paid by 20 projects that came to the IDA, $38.8 million. What those developers actually paid was $10 million, right? That difference is what we forego in taxes. 60+% of it to the school district, the balance to the city, a little bit to the county as well. If those developers were required to pay all of their property taxes, the way you do and the way I do and everybody else in this room does, we would be a long way towards solving our financial problems. A long way. Just last year, since the IDA got its ability to operate again, which it had lost for failing to manage oversight of the finances, 2 projects, 2 30-year pilot projects have been granted. Okay? Purely residential, 100% low-income housing. This is not economic development. That's not economic development. Right now, there are at least 3 more, same exact deal, 30-year tax abatements. How can we hold developers or politicians accountable for giving away taxes over 30 years? I probably won't be alive by the time I'm done paying off the taxes that they didn't pay into the city coffers. So it's very, very difficult for me to accept hearing that we're in very, very dire straits out of one side of the politician's mouth, when on the other side they're granting 30-year tax abatements to corporations. That to me is seriously problematic. I'd like your assurance going forward as the treasurer of the IDA, and you have a fiduciary duty to the city, to say that you're not going to continue to do this. We need to pivot and use the IDA to stimulate economic growth in this city. That's what we need to do. Thanks.
Thank you. So as you know, as you serve actually now on the IDA as a non-voting member, but as a representative of the school district, that I have been pushing this issue around the UTEP, and that we need to move away from the way in which we have been doing this issue, right? Issuing these pilots, because I agree that we have gotten to a place now where the formula in which we're using to allow for any of these projects, whether they are affordable, working for workforce, or even market rate, right, are causing a financial strain upon the city. And so while we may want to continue to move forward with trying to figure out how we do projects that make sense, we cannot continue to do it the way that we've been doing it, right? So even as of earlier this week, or last week actually, I reached out to another IDA, Portchester in particular, to ask for a meeting in which I'm having a conversation with them this week to find out exactly what they're doing, because it seems like their IDA is working, and they are able to do actually affordable projects without it being that, right? But I need to find out what that mix is. And as you know, I've also invited, right, for you to be a part of our small group to begin to look at that, right? Because I recognize the fact that we can't continue to do the same thing that we have been doing, right? So that's my, my effort, my commitment to do that as we move forward. Okay. Gabriel.
And by the way, not every company that buys a house is a big corporation. A lot of it's just sane people that use an LLC to limit their legal liability. They could be me, they could be Mr. Johnson over there. He can attest to that. So a couple of questions. The land bank idea about giving the properties to municipal employees was discussed by the city council, by council now President Daniel Brown, at an open meeting with the Commissioner James Rouse of Planning brought in to ask questions about it.
With who?
James Rouse, our commissioner, asked questions about it about 4 or 5 months ago, so it wasn't like just some make-believe strange thing. It's a difficult, in 2011, for Syracuse, this was created in the state law. It's a very difficult process. It takes a lot of infrastructure in the city. It takes a credit rating. It takes, a lot of what we...
But it's not simply just doing it and giving it to employees.
It depends on who's using it and who's designing it, but that's the worry here.
Well,
Right?
just for record, Comptroller didn't have a discussion.
I believe
Go
you.
ahead.
Okay. So just want to say it wasn't out of like thin air make-believe out of somebody's head. A couple of things, like when you mention, it's not just about the tax lien sales, which I understand at the Board of Estimate and Contract, I watched 2 RFPs for tax liens, maybe on commercial, were received. Those don't have to be read into the record when they're received in a meeting, but I think I watched one where 2 proposals for tax liens were received.
No, sir.
Okay, so I'll go back and find it and see if I'm mistaken. And then I believe that it's not just selling the tax lien. Well, first of all, like if I lived in the city, I would not pay if I could, I would just not pay my taxes, because it doesn't seem like there's any consequences to it really. So until you enforce the laws, like in May of this year, Yonkers has a tax lien sale. New Rochelle just had a tax lien sale. Until we start enforcing the law, who's going to obey it, right? It's like COVID with speeding. It was like, and they're still crazy. Mm-hmm. But the other important thing is to get them back on the tax rolls, right? Because we're losing over. And what happens when I hear like, oh, we can't forgive the school's taxes until we've paid them. We've made the school whole with all of our money. Those of us who probably all pay our taxes if we're showing up to a meeting like this. So we're making the school district whole $500,000 a month, probably another $500,000 a month starting this year, I think you said, for the next round, maybe another $500,000 a month the next year when they get another round. And the question is, how long are we gonna have to fill that hole? And then maybe the city goes back and forgives those taxes, or, you know? And so you took my money, you can't run a city on robbing Peter to pay Paul. Everybody, there's a social contract, man, that we all pay, and that's what happens. And if the city would stop raising the damn taxes so much, less and less people might be in that position. Thank you.
So I gather that you didn't hear that my initiative is to move this forward so that we can get these properties, back on the tax rolls. And the reason why we have the variety of options to do that is to make sure that, we're also balancing the issue around not necessarily having folks to lose their generational wealth and also to get thrown out, but give an option for them to be able to do that while the city also receives the money, and so that they receive the money and don't have to continue to put this on the backs of the taxpayers. I get it, which is why I then had the conversation with the Corporation Council and with the Charter Revision Commission about that particular section that, once again, I will say that the city has never taken advantage of, right? Which is, at this point, there is no way for us to get around doing tax lien sales. Not at the volume that we are at, right? The question is, to Mr. Hollingsworth's point, is to, which properties are we talking about where it makes sense to do that, right? So it's a combination of several things. It's that, it's the pilots, right? It's the revenue stream that's not meeting targets that are causing the financial strain upon the city. And probably some other things that I just had mentioned today, right? And so I recognize that. Believe me, while there may have been some trepidation and some concern around Darren Morton becoming the comptroller 3 years ago, I have been a quick study, and I've learned quite a significant amount around what we need to do. And I recognize that this partnership is not just about the council, the mayor, and I, but it's also about the people and the school district and even the county around how we need to begin to work together to figure out what that is going to be, especially given things like today when we get executive orders that affect all of us around, because of a good portion of our money is coming from federal government. It means that we either will stop operation, right, or we're going to have to figure out a way to ensure that we are not that dependent upon these kinds of dollars in order to move this city forward. Any other questions? If not, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first one of a series that we will have. And again, Comptroller at MountVernonNY.gov is the email address. The office is open. Remember that you should have received your tax letters by now. You should have also paid your taxes for the city and the second half for your school district by now. The important thing is not to try to fall behind, because as you can see, falling behind causes even more of a problem. So if nothing else, I think we're going to end this town hall meeting. If you have any other questions, you can come up and see. I'm sorry, yes, sir.
Yes, I have a question about the tax lien sale.
Yes.
Yeah, there says that the outstanding tax revenue is 52 million. 27 is the tax rate itself, and 25 is interest and penalties. Now, let's say the taxes, one homeowner might own $95,000. I'm just putting numbers. 50,000 will be taxes. Let's say 25,000 will be interest, and 20,000 penalties. If he's willing to pay in full the 50K taxes and the interest, will the penalties can be forgiven?
That is something that the council is actually considering right now. Now remember this, that we had an amnesty program, right, that did that.
Yes.
Right? Now one of the challenges with that amnesty program was that if people owed still the school district amount, They had to pay the school districts first, right? Before they could get into that. We are now at the place where I think that may not be as much of an impact. But right now, we are having conversations with the city council on whether or not they are going to make that kind of offer again as it pertains to people being able to have a discount on either the interest or the penalties. Here's the issue. We can never, just be clear, everyone, we can never discount or waive the taxes, right? It's only the interest in that, and that can only be done by a resolution from the city council, and it has to have very clear criteria for that to happen, right? It's not one-off in my friend, I'm just going to give it to them, okay? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much.
When is the next town hall?
I haven't scheduled it yet, but we are going to put out a schedule and I'll let you know, okay?